Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
We're not done commenting. Physically wasn't necessarily there, but
We know the difference between been down this road and deed restriction.
you've all been.
Limited jurisdiction.
It's the rule of the law. That, yes, it is. It's about an easement. It's about an easement. It's not about, I understand what easements are. I think you're probably right. There is an implied easement, but I really encourage you to take that up because it sounds to me like there is. But even if there were a legal easement on the property, it doesn't affect what we could do.
It's on board to do something that's not in his car to do.
Jeez, I thought it was going to be an easy one.
Me too. But then one thing I've learned that you're. Let me turn this off.
One more thing, and this is this ordinance referral on home occupation. It was already introduced by council. Jenny, do you or Tim want to say anything about this?
Well, we're basically harmonizing the ordinance with, I forget which one was which, but the one that we chose one over the other, the borough version or the township version. I forget we chose the borough one. And it's really a matter of, I think that the big difference between the two were that one, if you had a home occupation, like being a tutor, and the rules are, there's a list of occupations. In one municipality, you had to go and get a conditional use variance, and that's a lot bigger. It's onerous for the residents and costly. And in the other, you just could get a permit for it. So we're changing it so that you only need a permit.
Did you want to say something about this?
Jenny covered it pretty well, I think. It does come from the Municipal Code Subcommittee. They are, as Tim indicated, mostly the borough standards were being adopted. This would allow, based on the definition, the home occupations, the standards stay the same. It's 40% of the house can be used for it. You have to be a resident in the house to have the occupation. I think the one new requirement is requiring that you provide one additional parking space, as opposed to just normally there's either 1.5 or 2 spaces required. So if you come in and apply for the home occupation, you need an additional space. That's it. I found that it complies with the master plan. We believe it will help to preserve and protect the character of established neighborhoods. It's really almost a nuisance ordinance when you think about it, because for the most part, we don't know if you have a home occupation. If you're sitting typing at your computer or talking on the phone, I don't think we even care. But when it becomes a problem is when all of a sudden there are employees showing up either on a regular or semi-regular basis. There are customers coming, and the neighbors begin to complain. Derek left, but what he shared with me is most of the complaints about somebody's parking in front of my house. It may be a public street, and they may be entitled to. So this was put in place with the requirement for the parking space. We always try to balance, do we need more parking, less impervious surface that would go there. So it's really in place, I think, as an enforcement. We've had in the township, I think, 2 applications for home occupation, and that's been the concern. You may remember quite a while ago, it was somebody wanted to do some sort of cooking in their home and have people come to their house. And because it's a permitted conditional use, it also requires a site plan. So it has to come to the board. Staff can't authorize a conditional use and site plan. We did grant the one that came. The other one went away because of the cost. that are associated. You need an attorney, you have to prepare some sort of sketch plan, and the code committee thought it was important to combine the two and have this done at this point.
Yeah, I had one person give me a comment on this, on the home occupation, that it shall not include rental offices, a medical doctor or dentist. And the question was whether or not you could add alternative medicine, acupuncture, and massage to that, since someone, in fact, did have a massage studio on Bayard Lane for quite a while. I mean, that's probably a substantive change, but
Actually, I have an additional thought about that, and I can't figure out why we're trying to regulate what goes on inside a house. I mean, in fact, tonight you even commented on another project that what goes on the inside of the house is not important to us. Why? And occupations? I mean, I can think of 100 occupations that could go on in a house that aren't specified here. As long as we have rules about what goes on outside the house, why are we? Anyway, I do think it should be an accessory use, but what I want to know is who makes the decision then? Derek? I mean, zoning officer?
It will be enforced by the zoning officer. That's why I said it's really complaint-driven only. Derek doesn't go out and look at it. It doesn't call for anybody to register a home occupation, because quite candidly, anybody who has a home office, we don't know. It's really more, we need the regulation so that when there is a complaint that the home occupation has maybe stepped over being what most people would consider as a home occupation and become a business. That's the only reason to have the regulation. And most of the regulations are fairly old, whereas now it's very common for people to work from home.
Yeah, I think this is an antiquated problem. I don't think it is. I mean, I don't think it rises to the level of problem, and to do it so that the 4 people who complain a year can be, but I'm for it, I guess, but I must say I think it's really
In a very negative way.
crazy.
I also had concerns first about the additional parking requirement, which in sections of the borough just seems sort of crazy, but also about the proposed definition allowing only 1 student at a given time for personal instruction. I mean, so a tutor couldn't tutor 2 kids at a time, which in a lot of ways can be beneficial all around, and
Well, it depends on whether those students are walking or driving.
yeah, but
There are occupations that you can have in your house, and you generate traffic, and it does present a problem to neighbors.
Well, but we can regulate how many cars can be in the driveway, or how many, I mean, the outside of a place you can deal with. It's a community issue. The inside of a house, unless it's a bordello.
I'm not getting into the inside. I'm talking about whatever will take care of the outside.
does this work fairly well right now?
Well, this is a little bit different than what we have. We get very few complaints. Actually, I think what spurred this on was a complaint, and Derek took an enforcement, and when they found out it was going to probably cost them $5,000 to get their home occupation application in, they were concerned that that wasn't really fair. I tend to agree that, making it accessory use makes sense. We could talk all night whether it's 2 or 3 students. Again, because we only use it as an enforcement tool, we were just looking to keep it simple, because that's what people really complain about in any neighborhood, whether it's the John Witherspoon neighborhood or out on Drake's Corner Road. Somebody's parking in front of my house, they're running a business out of it, this is a residential neighborhood. So we wanted a regulation that we would then be able to enforce and take care of that problem, that basically said if you are going to have a home occupation that's going to rise to the level that the neighbors are noticing and it's a problem, you got to provide for the parking, because that's usually the biggest concern. Then it gets to maybe a little bit of noise and maybe a little bit about, there are a lot of people coming and going. That's why I began by saying it's really more of a nuisance type thing when people want, and they look to the town to enforce it.
And I think we want to keep in mind that this came out of the process of reconciling the old ordinances. This wasn't drafted from scratch. I think it would probably look different if it were something that was coming out of nowhere. But, you know, here I feel like it's moving in the right direction. I think it could be a little more lenient, but at least in the changes that happened, it moved in the direction of being a little bit more lenient.
And it is the more lenient of the two.
It gets really
the old
complicated
boroughs.
if you get into, are you going to say you can have 3 kids if you're tutoring, but only 2 if you're running a studio, because maybe they're different. If you're coming for a Pilates studio, maybe you're a little bit older and you're driving there as opposed to walking, whereas somebody who's tutoring high school kids, they're being dropped off by mom and dad, so you don't need the park. The board tried to tackle this, I think, 5, 10 years ago, and we stopped because as you get more and more into it, it gets complicated and it loses all sense. I think just having something on the books for enforcement reasons makes sense, simplifying the process so that if a neighbor complains against a neighbor, because that's usually what it is, and we felt parking is usually the biggest complaint we get, so let's deal with that up front. Candidly, if there's somebody tutoring for SAT or helping somebody with reading or math, and they had 3 kids in there, chances are we're not going to know until the neighbor complains, and then we're going to say, oh, you can't do that. Why are they complaining? Because they notice that there are more cars in the neighborhood than normal. So that's all that I think was the attempt here, was to give us something that makes it easy for people to apply and also gives us a little bit of a regulation so that we can preserve and protect that neighborhood to ensure that a business isn't operating there.
Was there much public comment at the council meeting?
At the council meeting? No. I raised the scenario of an author who hosts a book signing event, and would that be covered under, well, because there's something that says articles sold or offered for sale shall be limited to those produced in the dwelling unit. So,
Right,
yes,
but if
he
they
didn't
have
print the
10
book in
people
the
coming to the
dwelling
book
unit,
signing,
so-
that would be a problem.
You should have it in a
It depends how
bookstore.
popular the book is, Tim.
Well, you know, I think that's the problem. That's the sort of problem that this would envision. Would be, now, if I were a prolific writer, not me, but if the author were prolific and was putting out a new book every 6 months and having these gatherings, then we'd like to have something to hang our hat on, I think.
Can't imagine having a book signing at home, actually. It's really a mess, usually. Jerry?
Yeah, just the ones that I had, with respect to the tutoring with a single student, just requiring a parking space for that just doesn't seem to make any sense.
If it's a low key, we're not going to know about it. Most people don't go this route, Jerry. What we do get is complaints, and it's really about somebody parking in front of their house. Yeah, you could change it to 2, you can change it to 3. Just
I think there are a lot of tutors in town, and none of them have permits. I mean, I think it just goes on, and no one.
Yeah,
and as Gail said, in today's age, you don't even know it. Everybody does it. That's the problem with it. But people complain about it.
It
I have a question.
It depends upon how.
If somebody complains, like, does the owner get fined, or it's just they get a warning, or what's the?
The normal process is simply, we would tell them, this is what the ordinance says, you have to comply. So if they don't have that extra parking space, they would not be, they'd have to cease and desist. If they don't, we'll take them to court.
Mm-hmm. And the one question I wanted to ask was the no signage thing, because that I do see all around town that people put a discrete extra sign out. I mean, if you're having students or teaching something and they need to find the house,
Well, street house numbers are a better way to go, because the one case I was mentioning, that's what happened. They put a sign out in front, and somebody complained.
well, I've seen these signs, yeah, so. Anyway,
Feel free to call Derek if you see other signs and want to let him know, but I mean,
I don't bother Derek, he's got enough people.
but that's
complaining to
really,
him. This is here for master plan compliance?
Yeah, it's indisputable that this complies with the master plan.
Thank you.
And I therefore move that we approve, say that, or approve it, or whatever is required.
And I'll second
And send it
that.
back to council, let them argue.
All those in favor?
I,
All right. Mildred.
second.
Thank you.
I have a, sorry, before we adjourn, I have just one request. It was in regard to a presentation. So Louise mentioned earlier to, well, I've spoke to Sophie Globier, and she wants to have the Storm Watershed Association come present next meeting, and if that would be possible.
This is the presentation they did to the council?
Right.
very good.
So they want to do that again for the planning board too. Okay.
And I think we could ask him to update it in view of some of the things that we've talked about. If, you know, difficult soil.
We're working on updating it.
Right. Okay. Great.
Do you want to find a time with? Is that okay? Can you hear? Okay. So, yes. Okay. Job done indeed.